Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast, where we've got lots of stuff to talk about today, from the F175 launch event to Monaco getting 2 stops now instead of 1, and the fact that Oscar Piastri is now apparently mid. How are you, man? You ready for some F1? We're almost back.
Finally, we are getting close to cars being on track, and I can't wait.
I can't wait for 8 hours of testing a day. I'm such a nerd. I will be watching it.
I love it. Yeah. I love it, honestly. I mean, we should do an instant reaction or something after every day.
I used to do like
or something.
or what was it in 2022 or 2023? I think I did.
20,
I live streamed
the entire
the entire
day.
thing.
I remember. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I mean, that's even too much for me, honestly.
Yeah. I'm not doing that again. It was painful.
Yeah.
So where do you want to kick off? We've got
F175 launch event. Let's start with it because Coffeehead question. What's your take on the F175?
And I think
launch?
we're going to have 2 very different views here.
It would be for a change. It would be a nice thing, right? We don't really debate other than on politics.
Yeah.
So,
we debate that too much. Yeah.
Yeah, we should keep a tab on that.
Or start a
podcast. F175 launch event. Let's break it down into 3 bits: the good, bad, and ugly. Let's try to. Because actually, before you started this thing, even there was this post on LinkedIn by you might be aware of the Track Limits podcast. Mm-hmm. They did a few interviews with, I think they did one with Max and I don't remember which another guy. So apparently he had a very different view on the whole thing, or maybe it was a very fabricated one. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, so F175 launch. What was the good thing in your view when you try to break it down into that?
See, I think this is where we differ, because if I saw your X post, I'm going to assume you weren't a huge fan of the event.
1:41 a.m.
So well, that didn't help. Yeah, but
yeah.
It was 2 p.m. for me, so it wasn't too bad.
Finally, it's already 12 here, and I'm more excited about this one.
I liked it. Like, there were parts of it that were kind of, I think, could have been better, but I liked it. I have to say, like, I think for the more casual fan, average casual fan, yeah, I think that perhaps this is probably a better event, just getting everything. I think maybe for diehard fans like you and me, I do kind of, there's one bad side to this I miss, which is kind of the fact that we don't get that 2 weeks kind of random events build up to testing.
Yeah.
But I do think this was, like, if it's a one-off, I think it was a really good idea. If they do it again, I think there has to be some change to that. But I think on the most part, I was pleasantly surprised. I was kind of expecting it to be a really shitty event, and I was kind of surprised, especially Jack Whitehall. Like, I like Jack Whitehall. His Travels with My Father's series is good. I've seen him on panel shows. I haven't watched much of his comedy, but I was kind of like, him in F1? Oh, I don't know. But it was actually decent. So, like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of good things to it. I think there's 1 or 2 downsides that if they do it again, they would need to fix. But I generally liked it. But I guess we're probably going to discuss in detail why you didn't and argue on some finer points.
Yeah, I'll get to the bad bit later. But first, the good part. I think the good part was we saw all the drivers on stage. I mean, before the season starts, I think it's a good thing that all of them just get together. I would have preferred if the press conferences were live streamed.
Yes.
You really had to dig those things up, and I don't think that's the best way to go about it. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much production value. I mean, you'll know better on this front, but it doesn't take that much production value to actually put those things up. UFC does it often, where they have individual publications. They set up their their own production apparatus. Very you can say easy to move, and they have their own live streams. It's very easy to do.
They record and stream the press conferences around race weekends anyway, so it's not like they have to do anything extra. They have the equipment. They just set it up in a room. It's a couple of cameras and some microphones. Like, the guys would have been filmed and mic'd up anyway by the teams, so it's kind of like a,
They should have done
I don't
that.
understand that. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
I think that should have been there, because I think that would have been a more. It gives a more, you can say, a personal touch. Something that I think we missed in the event. I think for me that is probably a good part. I think Jack Whitehall was fine. I think he tried his best to. I think after a point it became a bit too much about Charles Leclerc, because And
Yeah.
one
Okay.
one joke is fine. Then it became I think you could see it on Leclerc's face as well.
It
That
was a
okay,
bit like, okay,
maybe
yeah.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
probably have to steer clear of this one. So, anyways, if we're talking about the good thing, we got to see the cars. I think the lighting should have been better because the cars were the main, the superstar of the whole thing. The
Yeah.
liveries were not as clear. Look, if I have to go back to X or other social media channels to actually see the renders, then I don't think it makes sense for me to actually go through the whole thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, maybe the I have heard a bit of Machine Gun Kelly. I knew nothing about anyone else.
Yeah.
Zero. And I think Peter Brook, friend of the channel, I think he had a similar view that maybe they should bring people. Maybe spend a bit more money to bring more global stars so that actually we know a few of them. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to talk about the good thing. I think at least we saw all of them on the stage. We saw a few interactions afterward where I think George was probably a bit drunk when he
Yeah.
approached Lando and said that congratulations, you're the favorite for this season. And Lando said that yeah, I'm probably going to have. Basically, he's going to win a lot of people a lot of money. So
Yeah.
on the good bit that. Now let's get to the more meatier bit, the bad bit. Let's start with you. What do you think?
The thing is, right, so like when it comes to the downsides of it, I think this was very much centered around the I think they went back and they looked through old live streams of launch events and maybe some chats and basically just saw everyone going, stop talking, get to the fucking car. I don't care about this conversation. And they essentially went, do you know what we should do? We should just pander to those people and just do, you've got 7 minutes each, do whatever you want, but like 7 minutes, show the car. You know, like
Yeah.
done. Which I get it. It made sense because that is kind of the feedback that we see in every launch event. There's nerds like me who want to hear from the engineers and the drivers. And even though we just hear the same fucking thing, which is, well, we did a lot of work, but, you know, hopefully we'll do well. But you never know what your team or what your competitor is going to do. You're getting the same answer, but we kind of like to hear from the team bosses and engineers. I think if they were to do it again, that's one thing they should definitely change. That's the kind of bad for me, which is maybe do your 7 minute big explosive media presentation and then just make it that there's 3 to 4 minutes at least of just the drivers, a couple of engineers, or at least the team principal standing in front of the car, well lit, and do the talk. If it bores everyone, it's 3 or 4 minutes. Some of us nerds will enjoy it. Great. Done.
Yeah.
Problem solved. The only thing I would say to that is I'm not that concerned because basically every team, apart from Red Bull, is now starting, like Ferrari, for example, yesterday, are starting to have their own interviews separately, their own launch events separately, you know. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, this is fine. And to be honest, the teams who don't are teams like Haas who just show a render on Twitter anyway. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
who cares? So
I think that's a good point.
you know, I'm not that concerned about that because we're getting that separately from all the other teams anyway.
Yeah.
That was the only real big downside for me. I agree with the music. I think the music, like, fine, but it was also just like, was it Machine Gun Kelly that was the country singer? Or, you know,
No.
you could tell I'm not big up on the musics.
Perfect. I mean,
I'm a big music guy, but I don't know modern music.
Yeah, there could not be a better way to accentuate the point I made.
No,
was the
Machine Gun
first
Kelly
one.
was the first act, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was the country guy?
I don't know, man.
Okay.
I didn't know anyone else
I knew
afterwards.
Take That, but I was kind of also like, the audience fit for Take That doesn't, like, I feel like Take That is what all of the team bosses and the F1 directors wanted, because they were like, these guys were huge when I was young, and
Yeah,
all the
it
young
seems
fans
like that,
were going,
right?
who the fucker Take That and where is Robbie Williams? You know?
Yeah. Look, half of them will be who is Robbie Williams as well.
Yeah,
They won't know,
yeah. So, yeah.
right? It's yeah. I think for me the bad bit was I felt everything was a bit rushed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it became you've seen all these award ceremonies, right? Grammy, Oscar, where they have this time thing where you have where you get on stage, you get your award, and tuck, 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 there's music that continues to play. And it seemed like everyone was given a question beforehand, every driver and everyone, and they knew what the answer was going to be. as soon as they were on the stage, they knew what the question would be. They just blurted the answer and they just went.
Yeah.
Did if there was any new fan, let's assume someone saw DTS or anything, and they came in to watch the whole thing. First of all, the clips, the documentaries, or whatever you want to call it, they were very fast. It's very hard to. For me, it's very easy to understand when the Williams documentary comes in. A lot of people don't even know that Williams ever won a race.
Yeah.
That's the state of Formula One fandom right now, and they would not have grasped it from the entire visual that was there. Maybe just use stats. Max was not even interviewed. The reigning world champion was not interviewed.
That was definitely a Red Bull decision, though, because Red Bull didn't even talk to them on stage. I'm not sure what that was about. Maybe because of the boos that they expected, but it just seemed odd.
Horner said
talked,
something. Yeah, right? Then he started getting booed.
I understand Horner getting booed, and I kind of don't care because Horner likes to kind of play to that sometimes himself.
He played. He did. If you saw, he played. He started smiling and
so like he kind of likes that playing the villain thing, and like he's always said Red Bull kind of works better when it has a target on its back. So I kind of think that's fine. The booing for Max is kind of like I get it, I do, and there's been some instances last year where obviously some British fans weren't going to be quite happy with Max, but I also just
they're not going to be very happy anyways, right?
Yeah, of course,
since 2021.
But I just don't get it. But at the same time, it's also just like, as much as I wish people would stop. In sport, we just always get this hero and villain arc, and it's kind of just part of it. And when people started complaining about it, I was like, Max didn't seem to give a shit, so I kind of don't really either.
Honestly, neither did I. At the end of the day, those guys paid their money. They are there, and let them do. Unless and until they are
also, if you're
punching
a
anyone.
sport, I'm kind of just like, you're a bit of a tool anyway, so I don't really care.
Exactly. That's the whole bit. I mean, go ahead and make a fool of yourself. Again,
for me, with sport,
speech.
it's always like, I love these rivalries, and I respect these rivalries. It's what sport's about. But I was never the type to be like, boo, you're terrible. It's like, no, I'm like, this is class. I want to see them fight. Like that's.
Honestly, I've gotten used to it since 2013 when Vettel got booed, and it was basically got booed by, let's be honest, by the Alonso Hamilton fans who were just frustrated that their drivers were not winning. That was the whole bit. And both of them played to it, and it was disgusting to watch. But after a point, it's like, sure. At the end of the day, he's taking the trophy home.
I think it
comes down to that.
I think maybe, I think the thing is, the problem with DTS, maybe it's not a problem, but it's something we're just going to have to get used to. And not even just DTS, but the fact that F1's obviously reaching a wider and wider audience, is that there are good sides and bad sides to Formula One no longer being the quote-unquote gentleman's sport, and more being open to everyone, which inevitably means British soccer fans who are the worst people on the planet. I said it here live, I don't fucking care. But you know what I mean? Just these people who they like to drink and fight. I mean,
soccer fans in general, not only British fans.
It's not just, but British are the worst. I'm saying it. I don't care if there are British people listening. As an Irish person, I'm allowed to insult the British, and as an Indian guy, so is fucking he. Yeah. Check the history if you don't know why.
I didn't really care, honestly, with the whole booing thing. I saw a couple of posts where they were like, Lewis should speak to, why he's not supposed to morally police his fans. I mean, that's an utterly stupid
also that
suggestion to make.
That is also just making an assumption that it is just his fans booing. I'm sure there's but I'm sure there's also Lando fans and fucking Charles fans.
If there are Lando's fans, they came with their parents and they won't be allowed
Russell
to boo,
fans
right?
As well, they came to check out the trains on the way home. That was a really inside joke from Jack Whitehall as well. That was just brilliant. By the way,
True. Yeah. But on the bad bit, I think this probably the whole music bit, it kind of pissed me off. The way, the personality. For me, the superstars of the sport are the drivers, and if you do not let them be, it's such a stupid thing to do. You're not selling the product in the perfect way in that case.
This was, I think, one of the sides of Jack being there that was good, though, was he did roast some of the drivers a little bit. I think it could have been harder.
The drivers speak. For me, let the drivers speak. These drivers are basically heroes for a lot of people. Let them speak. They spoke one monotonous line. Are you telling me that the Leclerc was what is the one word that you I don't know whatever the fucking question was. For Lewis, it was the same question, and he said invigorated. They did not think on their feet, right?
This was my point of what I was saying, which is I think if they were to do it again, as much as there is the other like events that I talked about that the other teams are doing anyway, they should have just had a mandatory like, okay, you do your 7 minutes, and then we've got say 3 to 5 minutes where the drivers and the team
fans
principal
ask the questions.
even better.
Let them do that.
Even better. But like 3 to 5 minutes where they get asked questions. Maybe even it doesn't need to be the engineers. That's fine. But like the team principal, the two drivers. Even if you bring a random fan up on stage with a mic and he gets to talk to them for 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah,
beautiful. That would have fixed so much of the problems.
Exactly. The personal aspect was not there. It was very robotic, very rushed for me, honestly.
Yeah.
And obviously, one biggest thing, the lighting sucked. The lighting sucked.
That was
you
always
cannot
going to be
have
an issue, though. Yeah.
But honestly, look, that car is. First of all, the camera angle from where you cannot even see the car, the kind of minute details that have been changed, you cannot see. What's your view on Mercedes being that many shades of black?
I don't know. There was some weird stuff around Mercedes, right? Which we guess we can talk about. Which is, I don't think that's the final livery. First of all, because Ineos red was removed, and I only noticed it after someone pointed out that they're going. Because what happened was when I saw it on the video.
Radcliffe is in a lot of trouble, by the way.
Sure.
Apparently, he's
when I
being
saw
sued
it,
by the All Blacks team.
There's a lot of
some sponsorship issues. Yeah.
But like when I saw the thing of him on the thing on stage, I didn't notice the red was gone because I noticed the Ineos on the front. Yeah. And it was only when I saw that my brain just kind of went, oh, it's the same livery. And it was only when I put it online that Baxty immediately was like, the Ineos red is gone. And I was like, oh shit, right, yeah. So I don't think that's a final livery. I think that was a last minute discussion because the grey at the silver at the top didn't quite blend in the way everything else did.
It looked weird, right?
Yeah, it looked like someone had literally just gone into Photoshop, changed the red to silver real quick before the event and was like, oh shit, like, quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised. I was a bit surprised. We knew this for a long time, so I wasn't surprised at the event, but I was a bit surprised when Toto, in that video they did with Hamilton, talked about how they were going to basically keep the black. Yeah. However, I have a little bit of a theory on that, which is I think they're going to keep it for this year when they don't expect to be competitive. And basically return to silver in 2026 as kind of a fuck you.
I think this might be their best season. You don't know.
Maybe it'll backfire. But look, I think it was a nice. I think it is kind of a nice thing of almost just a one last tribute to Hamilton to say thank you and a send off maybe, and
I mean ideally look if you want to keep some just as a tribute
it is
or
part
something.
Of their history as well,
It is, but it's supposed to be silver arrows. Or just stop calling it that because this was not silver arrows. My first reaction was, okay, it's silver arrows, but then the renders came out and you saw, look, there's a lot of black in that.
Do you know what would be really nice for them to do from 26 onwards? Like, I'm fine with them doing it, and to be honest, it kind of is almost like just being the bigger man compared to the fans that have been just arseholes to the team. So it's kind of a nice,
But honestly, what for me, the biggest thing is when will Mercedes be the brand that it is supposed to be?
Because I'm hoping that Ineos troubles kind of blend into Mercedes, maybe getting more involved again like they were in the past, because they've kind of shadowed out a little bit as well. It's kind of just become Toto's team at this stage. Yeah. So like what would be nice though is if it goes back to silver arrows in 2026, one thing I think they should do is they've got the red star for Niki Lauda, obviously.
Yeah. Do something similar, right?
You know what they should do? One red star for Niki and 7 black stars for Hamilton. Yeah. And then the rest kind of blends in. That would be really cool to just keep the 7 stars as like thank you for 7 championships.
Yeah.
No, 6, isn't it? Is it 6?
6, yeah, 6. Yeah, he won 6 with them.
Yeah. Sorry, so 6 black stars would be cool.
Yeah.
The livery is
I think that's fine. If you remember, I think Williams and maybe it's McLaren. They have the Senna tribute, the S, right? They also have it.
McLaren and Williams both have something.
Yeah,
Williams
McLaren,
more.
Williams.
Yeah. Williams
Just
for
do
obvious
something like
reason, are
that.
more
Don't.
blunt with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, this was the bad bit. Okay, now to the ugly bit.
Okay.
What pissed you off?
See, I don't know if I was quite pissed off. The Alpine one was just ridiculous. I had the same face that Flavio did when they cut to him of like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? Like, Williams made sense. You know, the history of Williams.
Williams
thing,
was nice, yeah.
beautiful. McLaren as well, like big history. Ferrari with the Enzo thing before they did theirs. Red Bull makes sense because Red Bull's always kind of been that like kind of media marketing company, so that made sense. I think all of them kind of, I was like, apart from maybe Sauber as well, was a bit like, okay, it was really cool, but then also just like, what does these drums have to do with Formula One? You know, like what's going on here? But Alpine was just straight out like, what is this? Like, what is going on? Alpine, I hated. So yeah, I'm also still annoyed at them for poaching Franco Colapinto because they better put him in the car and he better have a career. But anyway, Alpine I didn't like. Apart from that, the rest was and the things we've already talked about with the interviews. The rest was kind of fine, but I think the problem I had was I wasn't expecting much, so my expectations were beaten. So, you know,
I think for me the biggest problem is they put too much into it, and there's still. What was the point of the whole thing? That's what it comes down to. For me, that's the biggest question. Cause what did they gain out of doing something where everything was so rushed? Drivers were not happy. Team principals had a line in place. Look, none of them looked like they had a good time. For the most part, the fillers that they had, no one really associated with it. It wasn't fun in any which way, the music system and everything. Then to add to it, so whatever we've got to know, I mean, I think you've also been aware of it. The prices were out, they were off the charts.
yeah, I don't care though. I wouldn't go.
Exactly. Yeah, apparently our journalist had one. She got the accreditation and everything. The invite was there. Who's going to London at the Indies? Especially right now, it's how chilly it is. It's very exclusive. Fine, I understand that. For me, the question is, you're putting so much into it. Maybe put a bit more. Maybe have a bigger star in place so that getting fucking MGK in place. And if you're going to have him in place, maybe have him have a bigger role so that he can put some good. Because what I think the song that he played, I hadn't heard of it. While I've heard a few of his songs earlier, it's like there was no association for us as hardcore fans. We couldn't really associate with it. If there's a new fan that comes in, he's not converted into a Formula One fan because he does not take anything away from this whole thing. And you have to question the amount of 3 to 4 hours they've put in, the amount of effort the teams have put in, and they are not happy. Drivers are not happy. None of them seem to be in. It's not something anyone looked forward to. And if you're going to put something that no one is looking forward to, then what's the fucking point of it?
See, I don't know. I disagree in one way. I do think for most fans, this is probably better than 10 individual random events, especially where 6 of them are generally stuff where you're going, why am I hearing from the CEO of BWT or Atlassian talking to me about how their product, which has nothing to do with F1, fits so wildly into F1, and then hear from several engineers, which I love, but most people are like, what the fuck is he talking about? Not telling us anything while I sit there and go, is he telling us anything? You know, like, so I think in many ways this is a better idea for most fans. I think it was
How does
a
this
bit
rank
of fun.
compared to the Ferrari launch of last season? Remember last season's launch?
Ferrari launch last season was beautiful though.
Yeah.
You know, like
That's the whole
they
thing.
did an event, got the car out on track. If they do that, even better. My daughter clearly doesn't like the Ferrari event.
Yeah.
But yeah, if every team did that, great. But then the other thing is, if we would have had a perfect balance of that, if Ferrari had done their event and then live streamed the car going out on track this season, that would have been great. Like, you know, so I don't know. I do think having this one launch event is better than the like various events in some ways.
I'd say rather they stretch it out. Honestly, I think there are two. If you had to make it better, how would you make it better?
I'd probably have this early on as a launch livery thing, quick interview with the with each of the teams, and like you said, maybe instead of having 3 random acts, I'd probably have just one big music event to send it off at the end.
Yeah.
So by that point, I can just go, yeah, I'm not interested, and click off. Whereas the casual fan who's there can enjoy it, whatever.
Yeah.
That's probably what I do, and then do that first and make sure that's the first event. And then we get 2 weeks of each of the teams like showing off their real car or having their real event, or, then we get best of both worlds. There's an event that all the casual fans can watch, and then we get kind of our in-depth stuff with the teams later on. Like, I just think if you try and do one or the other, it's not going to work. You have to do both.
Exactly. And you know what I would have liked? I would have liked to see Jack Whitehall bring a few drivers on the stage, do something with them, have a chat or something on those lines. Because again, I don't know how many times I actually have to stress this thing. The drivers are the superstars of the sport. And if we do not give them,
they should have. What they should have done, actually, now that you say it, is they should have had an on stage, Jack Whitehall sits down, and throughout the night you have maybe 3 launches, 3 or 4 launches, right? After that, you have a sit down with 10 of the drivers in a circle, even if it's just fast fire questions, them bantering with each other, laughing with each other. Do the other 5 launches of cars, or you could do 3, 3, and 4. It doesn't matter. And split the drivers up, and then maybe have at the end the team bosses sitting around, bit of a laugh, joking with them, talking about the season. More engagement would have been fun.
Exactly. I mean, they missed that, and I think I would have loved to see that.
Yeah.
I think maybe if they're doing something similar in the future, do this.
Honestly, this is what I mean. They could have the best of both worlds, where if they did it early, so it's the first thing, we do this launch, a bit more engagement with the teams and drivers, and then the teams can do their hardcore fan thing where, they do this interviews with their engineers and their drivers, and it's in depth. Better than that would be if Formula One said, right, we're having this big event, and then like the McLaren interview and like the Ferrari interviews, Formula One actually send their people to sit down and do a 40-minute interview with each of the teams, and that goes up on the YouTube
channel. And they'll be fine
channel.
with it, right?
Yeah,
easily.
That goes up on the YouTube channel then afterwards, like the McLaren interview. Why not just do that?
Exactly.
Because there's
no
a lot
that they could have done, right? It does. Again, it's the entire Americanizing the whole thing, right? You can't. F1 is not an American sport, and there are a few elements that you can pick up, but still, it's not the same. Anyhow,
Look, I think it's an improvement in some ways, but there's definitely improvements they can make to it, and I would not be against the idea of having a best of both worlds, just like I said, just one big launch event for casual fans, and then some in-depth content for us more engaged fans over the 2 weeks before testing. That would be ideal. Perfect.
I'll be fine with it as well. Yeah. And honestly, the drivers would not sit and have a face like they do not want to be there. Yeah. And that becomes very evident the way Max did not want to be there, the kind of couple of jokes. Leclerc got pissed off after a while. Norris, it's not fun in that case, right? Not for them, not for us, and it should not be the case. Anyhow, talking about that, I think that kind of wraps it up when it comes to F175. But what did you make of the entire beef or supposed beef between George Russell and Max Verstappen? Seemed forced, wasn't it?
I don't know how much of a beef there actually is, so I think it's just a joke between. I think it's just become a running joke.
So I'll actually lay down the entire table for you. So what happened was, just a few days prior to F175, Autosport released an interview of George Russell for their magazine. They had a few bits that they actually pulled out. On that, George kind of gave his view on the whole thing that happened at the time. And what he said, again, he said stuff that is very generic and it's not wrong. But the thing is, the fact that it came out just a few days before F175, it was in the news. And then George was questioned about it. The problem is with F1 right now, you do not want drivers to say anything. There's so much policing. And then you want to manufacture conflict.
Well, I think
that's the problem.
This is a problem though, isn't it? Because it's the FIA who don't want that stuff, but F1 do want that stuff. So you're getting this
but then
constant
FOM has to intervene,
pull.
right? They have to
Yeah.
intervene.
Yeah.
How could you intervene when it came to the Andretti thing, right?
I don't know though. Like, I mean, because if I learned anything from this event, it's like FOM are kind of enjoying that FIA are causing these things because it gives them something to kind of highlight them. You know, like
Maybe it does, but ultimately, I think it hurts the
they'll
product
need
if
to,
the
they'll need to
drivers are
stamp
not
down
happy,
at some point.
right?
Yeah, at
Isn't
some
it?
point they'll need to stamp down.
But then the problem is, James Vowles has come out and said that he's fine with whatever FIA has actually put together. Toto Wolff has said the same thing, and I'm not entirely sure which direction the whole thing is going. It's a bit... Drivers are not happy, and you could
Yeah.
see it. Everyone that has been questioned about it, be it George, Albon, Carlos, Max, and all have the same thing to say, where it's like you're doing a bit too much. It's unnecessary.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what it is.
I think it's probably fine for like Toto at the minute and even James. Like they up until Sainz joined, they have two drivers generally that don't really get into trouble, so it's not a big deal. But if you've got Kimi like coming in and swearing like a motherfucker, and then you end up with like Carlos Sainz like getting annoyed and talking about it publicly, I think that's when you'll see the team bosses and the teams kind of coalescing because they're going to want to keep their drivers happy. So I think it's going to be when Max Verstappen and like Kimi Antonelli and I don't know Lewis or someone else starts swearing at some point. That's when you're going to see it backfire because the teams are going to have to go, right, no, this is ridiculous. And I think it's going to fall apart very quickly because I think if we're getting a title fight and they try and intervene in a title fight because someone was swearing, FOM's not going to sit around and let that happen. Like, there's no way. They're not going to let a title fight be ruined.
Why wait until that point, right? That's
because
the biggest problem.
But that's what they do. Like, they do this every
it's
time.
It's not a good thing, right?
No, it's not.
What they do is not the answer.
No, I'm not saying it's good, but that's what they do. Like, that is...
I mean, that's basically Ferrari's motto.
Yeah,
they screw up every season. And at the end of the day, every Ferrari fan will say, that's what they do.
Yeah.
It's just... I don't know. I do think there's one thing that actually comes out from the whole George Russell, Max Verstappen thing. I'd actually love to see them battle this season because, look, the heat is there, but it has simmered down a bit because, again, there was no point to keep it up throughout the winter break, isn't it?
I mean, there's a good chance they will battle this season because, I mean, either Red Bull and Mercedes will both bring cars that are title worthy, right? Or we could, there's one of three options. Either that will happen, Mercedes will once again flail and Red Bull will be fighting for a title while Mercedes don't. Or we could have a beautiful situation where Ferrari and McLaren are fighting for a title, Red Bull and Mercedes are fighting for third. And it's George and Max fighting for like third place in the title.
Yeah.
I hope it's the first one where we get four teams fighting one another. Because
that
George
and
Max
one, right?
would be incredible, especially if you sprinkle in Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Piastri, all kind of fighting for wins. Yeah, because Max and George, that will... George is a PR guy when he talks, but when he gets annoyed, he gets really annoyed. And we know that Max gets really annoyed sometimes. So
I think Max, and I think other than George, there hasn't been a driver that has riled up Max like he did. Because, again, I'm waiting. I usually don't really give a fuck about Drive to Survive, but that is one clip I'm actually waiting for. Because in Qatar, because again, Max might say that he did not make the comment that he'll put George in the wall. I know from resources that this actually happened and the clip is there, and Netflix is arguably going to put it out.
They will,
because Netflix was there.
They will, if they have that, they're putting it out. There's no way.
For sure. Yeah. That is one episode I'll actually want to see because
if they
can't,
if FIA or FOM push back and say you can't launch that, Netflix will leak that in a clip somewhere. Like, just it'll come out. There's no way.
But why would they even say that? That's the kind of content they need before the season starts, right?
FOM will want that out. Look, I think we should get some... I'm really hopeful that the front will be really tight so that we get... Because the rivalries in there... Because, like, I think even for fans, there's so much in there because you've got George Russell, who has been, both of us talked about, massively underrated. And if he's got a sniff of the title, he can give Max a fight. I'm not saying he'll win, but he can definitely give Max a fight.
There will be race. I think there's something that people need to understand. And being a fan, it's very tough to, grasp this concept. But no driver is invincible.
Mm-hmm.
When you have drivers like Max, Leclerc, Lewis, George, Lando, maybe Oscar in the same bracket, and Alonso, if these drivers have cars that are similarly paced, what's going to happen is there will be days that any of them beats anyone else.
Yeah.
It's not about that. There will be that if you're a Max fan, then he's going to win every race, or if you're a Lewis fan, then he's going to win every race. It doesn't work like that. There will be races where one of them will have the upper edge, and that's just how the season pans out.
Yeah.
Maybe
I think
over
if
a
we
season,
get that, it's gonna be fun. Because I do think there's a lot of people who have basically written off George Russell and Lando Norris, and I think they're going to be shocked by how good those drivers actually are.
I mean, we had it here, right? I think it was Baxty who said that.
Like we can talk about we talked about it during that podcast. So we there's a different discussion of, is Lando as good as Max? Like that's a conversation where it's very hard, especially at the moment. The answer is obviously no, but you could say like the potential, like you could argue about the potential, right? I don't think he is, but I think people massively underestimate how good Lando and George are. It's just that Max is at an incredibly high level. So the conversation is, are they at Max's level? I don't know. We need to see them in the same car. Lando didn't really get there last year, but it was his first season in a winning car. So, things could change.
The best example when it comes to Lando is, and people use it for the wrong reasons, it's Sochi 2021. Mm-hmm. He was winning a race in a McLaren that had no business being at the front of the grid.
Yeah.
And people need to grasp the concept that it's not about what happened in the fag end of the race, where it was basically, I think, 2 to 3 laps left when the rain came and stuff happened.
Yeah.
It's about the entire race where I think he got pole position. He was leading. He should have won. And he was doing it when he did not have the car capable enough of doing that.
So there's just
that should tell you everything.
I think people are just going to be shocked by how good these drivers are. And like I said, it's a different.
Honestly, I'll tell you something. They are not going to be that.
They'll just
no one's going to be shocked.
There
There will be basically a lot of excuses that it's only the car. There has been no change. If Max has the same car, he wins 50 races out of 20. Mm-hmm. It's just going to come down to that. And
true.
I mean, we've seen this. We've seen this movie before, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, let's hope we get to see it again anyway.
Yeah. By the way, so I'd actually put out the post where I asked our viewers if they had any questions or something. So Hank has a question, by the way. It's related to the upcoming season. I think we'll get to that as well. So according to him, why are the chances of McLaren and Ferrari are hyped up that much? The narrative is that they will improve on last year and Mercedes will, but Red Bull won't. Just strange.
Yeah, that is odd. Like, I have two minds to this in one way, which is I think it's an odd one to assume that Red Bull won't be improving massively, right? So I think that's the case. I think what's strange about it to me is that there's two teams which are, one is very much hyped up and one of them isn't. Ferrari is my example of this, right? Ferrari is very much hyped up to this could be their winning season, and everyone's expecting, I know, and this happens every single year for the past 400 years. But the other one is then Red Bull, right? And both of them are in very similar situations, which is both of them have changed a good bit of their mechanical platform, like as in the suspension mainly. Both of them are going to have to change big parts of that. Red Bull, because they basically hit some sort of ceiling or had some issues last year. And I know that from what I've heard, while they were able to kind of fix some of that in season, the winter they're going to have to change quite a bit. And just we know from Formula One history that when you need to make big changes, things could go wrong. McLaren being the favourites is very much based on the fact that they can carry over essentially the car and continue to develop on it for the most part.
Seems like they have, right?
For the most part,
if you see the car and compare it, it's been the case.
So my problem with that is that for both Red Bull and Ferrari, it could go really wrong, because if they get anything wrong, then they start on the back foot in a year where they have to split development between this year and next year. So it could go wrong. And historically speaking, I would say it's more likely to go right for Red Bull than it is for Ferrari. So Henk is right in the fact that it is strange there. I understand why there's more hype around McLaren than Red Bull, because they're carrying over a lot more. Or at least that's what it seems to be. I could be wrong there. But Ferrari versus Red Bull is an odd one, and Mercedes versus Red Bull is just an odd one, because Mercedes have continuously fucked up in these regulations.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get a shock situation where I think it's going to be... I do think it's kind of going to be McLaren at the top, but I think the other teams are going to be very, very close. And Ferrari is like Red Bull to me. It's a 50-50 coin toss of they could get their new spec completely right and be there, or they could really fuck up and be catching up the whole season. So I do agree with Henk. It is a bit odd that people just instantly assume, well, Ferrari's going to be great and Red Bull's going to be fucked. And it's like, history tells us the opposite. So let's see.
I'll only tell Henk one thing, that everyone else is stupid. Just follow what we are saying. We are correct.
No, well, knowing Henk for a while after being in the chats, when it comes to technical stuff, his opinion's pretty good. So I think he's probably right.
I agree with that. I think for me as well, I think for me, the chat that we had with Dr. Obbs was it actually, helped us gain a lot of insight into. By the way, guys, check it out. It's there. I think if 2 or 3 episodes back, we had a chat with Dr. Obbs.
I'll link it in the description when I upload this.
A lot of interesting, I think, the technical bits. And for me personally, I think we always had this assumption that the entire issue when it comes to Red Bull not being able to ride the curbs was related to the suspension. But apparently it was more to the fact that they had to ride, basically had to set up the car that stiff to gain as much performance as they could. And I think a lot of it is the Newey effect, where a lot of people have this kind of assumption that, well, it was Newey who built everything. It was the gold dust and everything. Again, it could be the case, but you'll have
We both know it's wrong. It's Rob Marshall.
Yeah, but again, Rob Marshall is also not there. So.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying. Rob Marshall left and things fell apart.
Kind of did, right? And as soon as Rob did, Newey said, I'm out of here.
And then Rob Marshall goes to McLaren, and McLaren start winning.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the first season where Rob Marshall has been involved in the car from the ground up.
Precisely.
So this is going to be a dominant car. We're going to see McLaren win 23 out of 24 races.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. But,
could happen. I mean, look, 2013 is a good example, right? Because in 2013, we were coming from a 2012 season where we had 7 different winners in the first 7 races. We've had 7 different multiple race winners this time around. I hope it doesn't
2013,
happen. Yeah. I hope that doesn't happen, because that would really screw things up for us.
Plus, it would be funny if Norris won like the last 12 races of the season, because then we know we just have an eternal, like, Norris just as a car merchant for the rest of history. It would.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, that's entirely going to happen.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't. But I think what we're going to say is, look, the regulations are very prescriptive, and the margins that are going to be gained. Again, they're talking about half a second maximum. A lot of these teams, in terms of gains in gains through the winter.
Can you imagine if we get half a second from first to 9th and then Sauber? Like that would be
right. Remember, in Abu Dhabi, the gap between the first and in Q2, gap between the first and the 16th car was around half a second. And I did not believe it at first, because James was actually quite vocal about it when he's saying that this season might be the closest in F1 history. I went back and checked, and I was like, he's right. Haas was P5, and I think Alpine was P4 or something in the last race of the season. And I completely forgot that it's happened.
Yeah, this like if the season starts as it ended, it'll be amazing.
Oh boy.
If we, especially if it is the case of we're just hitting the ceilings of these regulations, because you could easily have a situation where it's not only the top 4 teams fighting each other. Like, you could have the top 4 teams are the ones fighting for the title, but you could easily have like an Alpine or an Aston like floating around looking for wins. And if that happens, Oh, can you imagine Alonso getting his 33rd or Williams getting a win? Like fuck Alpine.
Podium even, right?
Yeah, like fuck
Yeah.
Alpine. But if we got Williams and Aston fighting for wins, so it was Alonso and Williams on the top.
Yeah.
Oh my, what a season that would be. Like, oh my God.
By the way, this might be the next step, right? Because what we had in 2024 was the top 4 teams, then a big gap, and then the bottom 6. Now, since the gap at front is not going to increase that much, and the top and the bottom 6 have the blueprint in front of them, so maybe we might see the gap shrink. Maybe we might see the bottom 6 get closer to the top 4, and who knows? Maybe if that happens, look, we are in for a great season.
We could have a
Still-
season that
yeah.
is as close to a spec series as F1 will ever have, basically. Which
Yeah.
would be a weird, wonderful season. Like, because
Yeah.
I love the tech of F1, but it would be nice to kind of almost have the driver is actually making the main difference this season. Obviously, strategy and team setup and stuff as well. But, that would be incredible for even just one season of just like the tech doesn't really matter this season. Like,
Yeah.
that would be...
All I want to see is Kimi Antonelli in his very first season win one of the first 3 races, then win more than 4 races and finish second in the championship,
This is to beat
So that-
Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton's records.
so that he becomes the most hated driver in Formula 1 in his very first season. I mean,
What if
just
he wins?
imagine if that
What if he
happens.
wins the title?
Oh, God. Oh boy.
He'd become the only rookie and the worst or the youngest driver, right, to win the title.
Yeah.
yeah. That would
Would be
upset.
the first. I mean, not the only rookie because 1950. So
Okay. Yeah.
So that would always be there. But again, he beats a lot of records. He'll be the youngest world champ. Okay, maybe not. Let's not make him the youngest world champion. Vettel has the record. So let's
Yeah.
keep
Screw
that
that.
aside.
Yeah. Forget about that. Yeah. No.
Second.
Yeah.
If he finishes second, wins more than 4 races, wins one of the first 3 races, he'll be the most hated driver in Formula 1. And it would be awesome to see people hate on a teenager because that's Formula 1 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get into other stuff, something you sent me on the list of things to talk about, I don't know about. At least I don't know if there's an update on it. I knew about kind of the rumors last year, but Christian Horner and Adrian Newey beef. What's what's happening?
So it was Newey who did an interview with Michael Schmitz, or I'm forgetting his name. He's from the Automotor and Sport from Germany.
Automotive und Sport.
Yeah, whatever. So whatever.
Yeah.
And so there was one thing that he said where he was specifically talking about Red Bull struggles in 24. And he said that it came down to the fact that maybe the team was very inexperienced. The team of designers was very inexperienced. And that was interesting. And a lot of people did not catch on to it. I'd put it out, and apparently Horner was questioned about it in the launch. And first of all, he said that I don't think Newey has said something on these lines. I have not read the quote and everything. But then, just like Horner does every time, he said, anyways, at the end of the day, the problems that we had, they go back to 2023, and Newey was part of the team then.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just the same old, basically.
Which is very interesting because, look, I did not expect Newey to actually throw. It's weird because Newey making comments about a team being inexperienced when he was basically part of the design team until Imola.
Yeah.
Till Japan.
But then,
I think it was post Japan he actually announced.
But then I guess there was clearly like some issues in the background, and also like obviously Red Bull for a while have been trying to deal with the idea of a post Newey era, so maybe there was some stuff being kind of almost forced where he's like, I'm not happy with this, But,
yeah.
Also there was I don't know, like there's the question for me as well is like how much of all of this is actually down to like Christian Horner, because I feel like he was dealing with a lot of Austria's pushback on stuff as well. So there's probably so much to this, and we're only seeing like tidbits of just what streams out. But then as well, like Christian Horner is definitely a man who likes to hold a grudge. So if something did happen, it
also seems a bit weird that. By the way, Horner's comment was quite. He knew that this had been said because everything was prepared. He started. I have not heard the comment. I've not read the quote and everything. I don't think Newey has said that. But he was also part of the team. So everything was prepared. He knew. And again, Horner is someone who keeps a tab of all these things. So
Yeah. Or at least
interesting.
he definitely has people telling him stuff because he always is like ready to come back with these things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Because Newey is someone who I don't think we saw him making these many interviews in the past, if I'm not wrong.
He doesn't like, from everything I've seen and heard of Newey and the way he speaks, he doesn't like to be in the spotlight. Like
Yeah.
he is just I think that's why a lot of like nerds like me just love Newey, because he is literally an engineer like to the core.
Yeah.
You know, like an introverted, like I'll do my talking with my designs kind of person, you know?
And keep me away from the nonsense, basically.
Yeah. Like even
Yeah.
like he was talking about when he joined from McLaren to Red Bull, and like he would have to do certain things, but even the way he went about it, like he wouldn't come into a room and be like, right, I'm firing this person and this person. He'd have like his secretary basically listening in on what was happening, and then figure out who to fire, and then kind of tell the team bosses who to fire, you know, like, so he's very much like he's probably able to confront but doesn't like to type of person, you know, like.
Exactly. He's not your manager. That's the basic thing, right?
He's an engineer, like just an engineer, which is why I'm very excited for Aston, because I feel like they're kind of willing to kind of let it become an engineer-led team, you know, to an extent, like that side of things be engineer-led, which is great, and that's, you know, keep the marketing side and the engineer side very separate, and that's what Red Bull did really well, and every team in F1 history that has done that has been very, very successful, and other teams. Well, the other team is Ferrari, and they have been very unsuccessful doing it the other way. You know, so I think Aston could be in a good stead in that way, which is they're just letting him kind of, all right, you just go. And it's not just.
And Alonso apparently said that Newey is the one who's kind of in control of everything, and whatever he says goes. So
I've noticed that Andy Cowell has come in and changed a lot of stuff, and he's basically said like 90% of the car is going to be different, and he's doing what I was saying a few weeks back, which is it sounds like he's stress testing because they have to make everything right, and I would not be surprised if there's been like a secret backdoor meeting between Cowell and Newey,
of course,
where Newey's basically said, look, I'm not allowed to work yet, but can you check X, Y, and Z for me and tell me who find out who the best people
what's
are.
Going on, yeah.
You know, like, so I would imagine that's why I would not be surprised if Aston had made a big step this year, just because I would imagine all of the team now is going to be like, I need to keep my job, so let's you know, if I'm not giving results, I'll be gone. So I have to kind of hurry up, you know. So.
By the way, it's also interesting that Bob Bell is a part of the team and no one knows. And Bob Bell has been, again, for people who do not know, Bob Bell was responsible for Renault becoming basically the team that ended Ferrari's dominance.
Yeah.
And by the way, if anyone is interested, go to Wikipedia, take a look at Mercedes Technical Team 2014. There's a name called Andy Cowell.
Yeah.
There's also the name called Bob Bell again.
Yeah.
So this man has been part of
Aston
two dominant
have just taken
eras.
the dream team. And Dan Fallows should have been part of that. Is Dan Fallows just gone? Because I feel like that would be a bit of a missed opportunity. Because while he's clearly not leadership material, he definitely has some good input that they could keep around. You know, which would be
I think if Newey wanted him there, he would have been there. But apparently, right? It's because as soon as Newey came, Fallows left afterwards, isn't it? So if there was a case of Newey saying that, okay, I want him there and he's worked with me in Red Bull, so he would have probably stayed. But
I guess the interesting one then is going to realistically be how Newey and Cardile get along, right? Because Newey and Cowell have a lot of respect for one another, but Cardile is coming from Ferrari, which is very much it's very much kind of a team
culturally differently.
It's like, this guy's important, the ideas don't really matter, like I'm in charge, whereas Cowell and Newey come from that background of the best ideas win, not the best people, you know, like so
I think a lot of people are also forgetting that there's a lot of admiration for Fernando Alonso from all these guys, and sometimes it does not get noticed. And again, I get pissed off a lot when people talk about elite drivers in Formula One and you're not mentioning Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
I think that's
It's because
fucking
people
stupid,
just get so held up
honestly.
on stats the whole time. Like, you know, they'll be like, oh well,
Or
look
age
at Max
right now.
Verstappen's like wins. He got them so much quicker than Alonso, for example. And it's like, yeah, but you're comparing two very
Apples
different
to oranges.
times, like, you know, and it's like it's not a reasonable comparison at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Fernando Alonso at his time was the youngest race winner in Formula One, the youngest champion in Formula One. And he did not step into a race winning car right
Yeah.
away.
No,
He stepped into a Minardi.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's something a lot of people forget. Anyways, a lot of talk about nonsense.
So preseason testing, I'm guessing we get on
Preseason
now.
testing. Yeah. Again, this is in Bahrain, if I'm not wrong, isn't it?
Yes,
This,
it's Bahrain 3 days, and then they fly. Instead of having the opener at Bahrain, they fly on to Australia for the opening race.
yeah.
Bit of a strange
The season
setup,
starts in mid March, right?
March 14th.
15th or 16th.
March 16th is the Grand Prix, but the practice is on 14th.
14th.
So,
Yeah.
So we've got 2 weeks, I believe, after testing before we jump into it. So
Yeah. And it's all because of it's called Ramzan in Hindi. It's called Ramadan in probably typical Urdu or whatever. So because of that, they've kind of shifted the whole thing apparently.
Yeah.
Let's just go through the teams, by the way. First of all, we talk about McLaren. Let's talk about the bunch.
Well, I think one thing maybe we should just mention as well for newer fans, because I know there's and some casual fans who listen. If you're going to watch testing, maybe just like a couple of things they should watch out for from the teams before we go through them, because I think like one thing with testing is lap times are pointless. Like these are some rules, because the teams all run different tires, different setups, different engine modes, different fuel levels. So the lap times are kind of pointless. Certain teams will go on glory runs. Other teams like to hold everything back. So what you should actually look out for and what is going to be interesting from all of this is two things: onboards and reliability. Those are the two things to watch out. Not in terms of reliability, in terms of engines.
There are three things to watch out for. And the third thing is our roundup at the end of the day.
Of course. Yeah.
But
what I mean by that is teams who don't get running, so things going wrong, is something to look out for. Essentially with testing, what we're looking out for is problems more than good things, because the good things, there's too many variables. But if you see like Mercedes in 2021 is a prime recent example, you see them kind of in testing struggling a lot, the car like oversteering, crashing, all these things. When you see onboards like that, you know that the team is struggling, because that's not something they want viewed by anyone. So that's the kind of thing. Look out for onboards. If the driver's having to kind of wrangle it all the time, it's like, oh, okay, this isn't, the car is not perfect. And then that kind of tells us, like, you see a team come out, Aston Martin 2023 is a perfect example of, they came out, the car was just a breeze to drive by everyone, and it was putting in some lap times. And it's like, even though lap times don't matter, when you put those two things together, you're like, oh, okay, Mercedes is struggling. It's Red Bull and Mercedes, Ferrari were struggling, and McLaren as well, obviously, but that was a different time. But Red Bull and Aston are the two who are kind of like, oh, everything's fine here, So
it was surprising actually. Aston was, the car looks good. Mm-hmm. The car looks good, and on third it was, they're getting a podium.
Yeah.
It became as clear as that.
Yeah,
they have to be. Again, there's a lot. Look, there's a typical pattern that's going to be there. The first day, I think it's going to be 4 hours, a gap and a 4-hour session. The first hour will be in the daytime, and during then you'll see basically them doing the installation laps, checking if the car's working fine, and then it's basically aero test and stuff like that, just to see if pieces are in place. In the next 4 hours, you'll see a few performance runs, a few long runs. First day is going to be that. The second day onward is where I think things start to get a bit interesting, because then you see the race simulations. Mm-hmm. Later in the day, you see performance runs. And third day is basically just, you can say, a confirmation, setup work and stuff like that. And that is an ideal day. Usually, ideal day does not happen. You'll see a lot of problems like an engine blowout. Sometimes the gearbox goes. Sometimes there's some issue with suspension. Sometimes the car doesn't work. Or what we had in the very first year, 2022, it was just bouncing like crazy.
Yeah.
And see,
you can you can almost tell by the drivers' reactions on radios as well. Like that's the kind of biggest giveaway, I think, in 2023 and 2021. Just looking at recent seasons, like you could tell the conversations from Max to the engineer versus Lewis to the engineer, and then in like Alonso to the Alonso wasn't testing, so it was Stroll who missed testing, right? Yes. So it's like Alonso to the engineer versus, say, Mercedes engineers talking to, you can tell by the chatter. It's like, like, because by the end of testing in 2023, was it? Yeah. Where basically Toto came out and said, yeah, we're going to have to change the whole car.
It was after Bahrain, they said that.
But at the end of testing, he was already saying, like, we'll confirm it in Bahrain, but I think, good.
In Bahrain, he flipped the lid completely.
Yeah.
And that's when Mike Elliott lost his job. But
Mike Elliott got sent out,
Yeah. Again, so just talking about the teams, I mean, just to give a brief idea of how things might happen. If you're looking at it from a McLaren or Ferrari's point of view, these two teams, what are you basically trying to improve, ideally? Which are the areas do you think they are weak?
See, like what I'd want to see from McLaren to give me an idea if the favorite status is just a smooth 3 days of testing. Like they are not changing. Like obviously they're changing basically every panel, but that doesn't mean much for them because they're basically just increasing on what they have. And they had a car that was very well balanced. They had the flexible stuff working. They'll probably be testing the flexibility of the front wing that they're going to use after 9 races as well. I'm sure Barcelona, that will come in. Yeah. So like, I would expect to see, like, if we don't see a really smooth 3 days of testing for McLaren, I would be concerned that they've fucked up because they should have the smoothest of anyone, just 3 days.
Yeah.
Ferrari is going to be an interesting one because they've changed the suspension, they've changed a lot of stuff on the car.
Yeah.
And like, the problem with Ferrari for me is just like, if they have a really bad, like a struggling testing session where the car balances off, for Leclerc, for Hamilton, he's going to be betting in. That's going to be a bit different, but Leclerc is going to be the one to watch there. If Leclerc is not fully comfortable and happy with the car, I would be worried because when Ferrari are really happy after testing, it means that they may have a decent car. It doesn't mean they do. It means they might. But when Ferrari are really unhappy in testing, it means that they're about to have the shittest season they've had in 40 years. So, that's...
It's worrisome, right?
Yeah.
I think for one area, again, if I may say, where McLaren might need to work on, again, McLaren being the fastest, it gets a bit blown out of proportion because when McLaren is fastest, it's basically two kind of tracks where there's high downforce. That's where McLaren kind of excels. But when there's a low downforce track, you see Ferrari come into the picture. You see other teams as well. So maybe a bit of a focus. So that is one area I think where McLaren still needs to work. It's basically on the low downforce areas. And that's what I think Andreas Stella kind of stressed on.
Mm-hmm.
For Ferrari, the biggest problem is their mid-corner downforce is something that they talked about. Where when it's the long corners, that's where Ferrari struggles. That's where it struggled. That's why I kind of struggled in Brazil. It was not really at the front, unlike the race prior, which was in Mexico. So I think that's one area where Ferrari would have wanted to work. But again, that would have been the case if they stuck to the old car. They've changed everything now. Look, it looks different from, other than the shitty livery.
The white. It's just the white stripe is just so annoying.
Why? Just why? I mean,
even to be honest, even if they put that white stripe but use the black and white HP icon, wouldn't have been perfect, but it would have been so much better. But it just
less of an eyesore.
Yeah. The thing for Ferrari with that big change for the suspension, though, the only reason I have a bit of optimism is one, what we've already talked about, which is I think there's just such marginal gains now. It's, it should be close anyway. But the one thing that gives me a little bit of positivity for Ferrari is they've already gone through like 3 or 4 variations of the suspension. So they should have the data to kind of go, right, we know how X works, we know how Y works. It should correlate this way now when we put the two together. The downside to that is 75 years of Ferrari history that kind of go against that idea. So
precisely.
Yeah.
I'm a bit optimistic when it comes to Ferrari, but again, look, Loic Serra joined this season. Before this, the car was built by Enrico Cardile, and he's not there. So there are a lot of things that can work against Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, moving on. I think ideally
just the last thing I will say, I really do hope Ferrari have a good car though, because I have to say, as much as I've been very critical of like Lewis Hamilton, and I still think he's going up against Leclerc, and it's going to be tough for him to like even challenge Leclerc in many ways. Not to bash Hamilton, but just because there's so many variables against him. But watching him,
Leclerc himself as a talent,
Leclerc's talent, as well as Leclerc being embedded in the team, and then on the opposite side, Hamilton having come off a very difficult year and now having to get used to a new team.
Yeah,
like all those things are working against him. However, the one thing I will say, seeing his kind of vibey, kind of happy nature over the last few days at Ferrari, part of me is very much like, I really hope he kicks off and does well, because it would be fucking beautiful. Like it would be a cool story. It's just multiple world champions going later on to Ferrari has historically been problematic, shall we say. So I wouldn't get my hopes up.
Honestly, look, for me, the simple thing is he's going up against Leclerc, who's a bigger challenge than what George Russell was. Plain and simple.
We think. I mean, maybe, Russell. Yeah. Russell hasn't had that chance at a team that's actually running at the front consistently, whereas Leclerc hasn't a lot of times either, but more so than Russell.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
For all we know, Russell could be a far better driver than Leclerc. It's unlikely.
He's good.
I think they're very close.
Yeah.
I think is more likely. But for all we know, Russell is like the best driver on the grid and just hasn't had a good car. We don't know until it happens.
Look, if he would have been, there shouldn't have been that many races where Lewis kind of outpaced him in terms of race pace.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it just makes you take a step back when it comes to him. But still, I rate Russell highly as well. But I think a team that is built around Leclerc being the talent that he is, there are a lot of things that I think if Lewis, again, Anthony Davidson said that if Lewis replicates the season that he had in 2024, where he kind of again got beaten by Russell, but it was still he won a couple of races. If he replicates that in 2025 with Ferrari, it's a win for him. I personally don't think so. I personally don't think that if that happens, Lewis will have a lot of introspection, because getting dominated in qualifying once is fine, and look, at that point you can probably drop the hints that maybe the team is not favoring me and stuff like that. But when it happens at a team where you're the chosen one,
if it happened at Mercedes and then happened at Ferrari, the team favoring thing just isn't like, it doesn't hold water,
Yeah, exactly.
So
let's see. Anyways, moving on to the next two teams, Mercedes and Red Bull. Ideally for me, Red Bull is... Horner did not seem as confident again when he was questioned that, do you think you're on top of the car? And what he said was that you'll see next week. And ideally, you'd expect him to be a bit more boisterous, but he kind of kept his cards close to his chest.
I think Red Bull internally is probably similar to what we are, because you have to keep in mind, sure, they have a lot more data than we do, but they also don't have the data of the other teams. So, things turned on their head very quickly last season for Red Bull. Like, Red Bull was a dominant force for 18 months and then boom, just got nowhere. Not nowhere, but you know what I mean? It just a complete drop off. So I think there's just too many unknowns for Red Bull, which goes back to what Hank was saying, which is the oddity of Ferrari are changing a lot as well. So why are people so positive? There is that point, which we've already discussed. But I think Horner is probably correct in being a bit we're not sure, because they have to change quite a bit on the car for this season.
Yeah.
And they're also changing driver. And it's in a season where they can't afford really to go like all in on 2025, because if Horner goes all in on 2025, which if they're fighting for a title makes sense, that could really cause him massive problems, because he was the one who pushed so heavily for an engine program for 2026. And if he has a bad 2026, that all falls on him. Like, there's no one else to blame for that. So I could see why he specifically would be very like, yeah, let's be a bit cautious about how much we want to get our hype up for this season, because he's got to balance 2026 and keeping Max happy while changing everything and coming in off the back foot. Like, there's a lot to deal. Because remember, they had a relatively bad race in Abu Dhabi, right? Too.
I mean, Max had contact with Oscar at the start, and Checo was being Checo. I think P6, P7, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, Max was nowhere. P6, P7, and it was basically because he had a crash.
Of course, yeah. So you've got that. Like, he was P6 and Perez was no contest, DNF'd.
Yeah. So him being him.
Not great. And
do you think Horner has reached, he has reached escape velocity at Red Bull right now? Like, is he in a situation where he's indispensable, or do you think his seat is in trouble?
I don't think it rides on this season, but I think there's a lot that rides on 2026. That's my view on it, because I think, look, this season he has Max. This season, at the very least, even if they don't win the championship, I do think they will be fighting for wins, and at least grasping it for like a half a season. Even if things go horribly wrong for Red Bull, I think they'll still be in the title fight until like the mid-season, by which point it might be too far off and they go like, okay, look, we need to switch to 2026 now. Like, enough is enough. I think that's where it becomes a problem, though, isn't it? Because if they don't win the title this year, for example, that means, like, and I don't mean them as a team, I mean Max specifically. That's when things become a problem, because we know that if Lawson doesn't do well out the gate, they're going to just forget about the constructors, because Red Bull just doesn't care about the constructors. For good reason as well. Like, how Red Bull's built is built around sports icons, not so the team doesn't matter. They build around Max. That just makes sense from their marketing point of view. But if they go into 2026 and they lose Max, and the aero isn't great, and the engine is behind, that's when, like, the smart decision there would be to keep Horner, because if you change, you're inviting someone who could just be worse. But we know in those situations, especially now that Dietrich's gone, boards tend to overreact and want a big change to make a headline, because that's what gets, that's what helps turn the PR around in a short term, and boards are all short term. And I think 2026 will be the real test for Horner. 2025, not so much, because I think it'll be close one way or the other.
My worry is that when it comes to 2026, I don't expect Red Bull to be right up there, because for one very basic reason, that would be the first time they're building a power unit. And a team, doesn't matter how great they are in terms of an organization or anything, skills take time to build, right? Iterations are needed, and look, if they somehow build a power unit that is competitive and as good as anything else, brilliant, great job. But you cannot bank on something like that. Especially in the very first iteration, it's still a big challenge. They've picked up a lot of people from Mercedes, and again, it's look, again, a lot of people actually ask this question, why Red Bull has actually gone independent when it comes to something like this. I think the bigger reason is they've kind of reached a point in Formula One, which I think McLaren should have by 2014, where they decided that their fate in Formula One when it comes to performance should be entirely on them. It should not be on a power unit supplier. They got fucked over by Renault in 2014. Plain and simple. If that had not happened, if Renault had not been that piss poor, maybe Red Bull could have done much better.
Red Bull's aero was quite good over that next 7 years, at various points. It was all,
Precisely.
in spite of the engine, they still won
Yeah.
a few races.
Yeah.
So
And exactly. And even when it comes to Honda, they kind of got fucked over in 2021 when all of a sudden Honda came in and said, okay, this is our last season. When something, it was pretty fortunate of them that F1 called on an engine freeze and they can focus on
yeah,
other
there's a lot
things.
of stuff that could have gone wrong where, like, Red Bull weren't getting a Mercedes engine, definitely,
Yeah.
and they weren't getting a Ferrari engine, no way.
Yeah.
So they would have been stuck with a piss poor Renault engine again if that hadn't
Yeah.
happened. And there's no way Red Bull would have been dominating the way they did with the Renault engine.
And
They-
I don't
they-
think even
they would
Renault
have been-
engine would be there, right? Because the bridges were burned. And
That's
quite
true, yeah,
horribly.
yeah. Well, they probably would have been forced to give them a supply.
Yeah.
So it would have been, which meant it would have been an awkward relationship where, the aero would have been brilliant, but the engine might have been just bad enough.
Pathetic. Yeah.
I
mean, even right now, Renault is 100 bhp behind?
I
That
think
kind
it's
of
only,
numbers?
it's only
Or
30
50
or 40.
bhp something?
It's 30 to 50.
Yeah, 50-40.
But that
Yeah.
that makes a big difference. Like, I mean, 10 horsepower could be equal to a tenth.
Exactly.
It might be way less, but that's the manufacturers of the engines like to say 10 horsepower is like a tenth. I think that's probably an exaggeration. It's probably less. But even if you
Yeah,
said
yeah.
like 50 horsepower is 2/10, 2/10 is a
Still,
huge
it's
deal
a lot.
now.
It's basically
a
50
huge
laps,
deal.
what? It's 2 to 3 seconds. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot. That's basically a race.
That's winning and versus points. Like,
Yeah,
and
precisely. And that is precisely why Red Bull kind of went down this route. And again, they might not succeed in the first season, but again, who do they have to blame in that case? They'll
this
blame themselves.
This is the problem, though. The problem is that logic made sense, right? And there's a key reason why when Horner went down that logical path, Mazashitz was clearly like, yeah, makes sense. Like, we've been in this position too many times now. Like, the problem is that now is very much a Horner decision, and the board is going to view it that way, and there's no longer Mazashitz around to back him up. So I think that could be a situation where there's going to be enough rope there where if they have a piss poor 2026 season and Max leaves, the board is going to be looking for someone's head, and the obvious choice is going to be Horner. And I don't agree with that situation. I think that's a bad decision, but I've just seen Formula One long enough to know that boards make these stupid decisions, and they'll end up giving Horner to another team because I don't see him just retiring unless he becomes like some sort of pundit or whatever. Like,
Why would he? I mean, he's already at a very... I think what will happen is what is going on right now with Binotto
He's
and Audi,
young as
where
well, right? Like, he's
51, 52 something. He's the second youngest.
He was the youngest when he
James
joined,
Walls.
right?
Yeah.
So
He was younger than David Coulthard
yeah,
when
like
he was his team
51.
principal.
Yeah, he's 51 right now. So like I could see him very much like if they do that, it's Audi or someone or Cadillac will be like, hey, look, you've built a team from the ground up before, and it's a new challenge for him,
And take the shares. Be a co-owner. I think that's what Horner wants, right? He's wanted that for so long. It's just I don't know. Again, Red Bull might be on a point where it kind of falls off because that's just how the cycle of Formula One works. But if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I mean, who knows? Anyways, after that, the bottom 6 teams. Okay, by the way, sorry, we didn't talk about Mercedes.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to Mercedes, it's become a bit clear that according to George Russell, they've basically, what he said was that in the last few seasons, we've found a problem. When we found a solution, it has ended up basically introducing another problem to the car. That's how we've really gone about the last 3 seasons. And according to him, this season, that's not the case. Where they've specifically been able to stay away from these areas where they can stumble upon to something drastically wrong. That's where they are. And again, when it comes to Mercedes, the problem is it lacks consistency. there are tracks where it's unbeatable, right? When it rains or it snows, apparently the car's good, but in general, the entire thing does not work together.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure how they fix that, but if they are able to just find the sweet spot, and again, this is a car that James Allison has built, they might be in a good shape. But yeah, let's see with them.
Yeah, I think, look, Mercedes for me is very much like Red Bull in many ways, which is like, I've got more confidence in Red Bull to kind of turn things around and fix things than I do Mercedes, given recent history. But Mercedes has also gone down a lot of wrong paths, and we're at the point now where everyone's getting so close that it would be easy for Mercedes to kind of just have enough things go their way that they're all of a sudden in a title fight, you know?
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting one. I just don't see any of the, like, apart from Ferrari, just based on history, I don't see any of those four teams being miles off the other ones. So I think McLaren is the clear favorite, but I think those four teams should be pretty close.
Yeah. I think operations are going to come into the picture a lot.
And that's where Mercedes and Red Bull could be the difference maker, because the two of them are so
exactly
good.
Silverstone, biggest example, Silverstone.
Yeah.
McLaren handed a win to Mercedes and a P2 to Red Bull.
Yeah,
they do these kind of things. Now in the bottom six teams, bottom six, funny. So the midfield or the extended midfield.
Yeah.
How do you see them kind of panning out? Because look, Haas has gone independent. Apparently, they are not copying the Ferrari. They're not changing the front suspension. Everything else remains the same. But again, the team seems to have a bit more confidence in how they're approaching things, how the car looks and how it behaves. It's something it's still we need to see.
Yeah.
But you talk about these teams: Haas, Alpine, Williams, Racing Bulls is a bit of an anomaly. It's basically how Red Bull is going to be. It's going to be a bit of a function of that.
Yeah.
And then finally Sauber.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see these teams stacking up?
I think Sauber, I have to say, is probably still going to be last, even though it's just because they've got the biggest gap to gain, and I think they're still got one eye on 2026. And there's like the new people coming in. Like, I think I'm a bit more confident about how quickly Audi can get on top of things, but that still extends to like 2027. Like, when I say quickly, I don't mean like by 2026 or 2025. Yeah. I mean, like, before I was thinking they'll be lucky to be anywhere near a podium by 2030. And now my brain is going, they're doing some things that could turn that around quicker. Like, you know, they could be better for them. So Sauber is still the last for me. That should be Haas, because all things being optimized, Haas should be the last team there. Like, in terms of just resources, everything else. But I think with the way Komatsu is building things and the way they are now getting access to some Toyota resources and so on, I think they could be in around, you know, just they could be ninth and fighting with the other teams. I do think those top six will be close. Top five and then Sauber, sorry. I do think those five should be close.
Top four and then Sauber.
Yeah. Oh, no. There's 6 teams at the back.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Got it.
So there's the top 4, there's the midfield 5, and then there's the backmarker Sauber. That's the way I think it should be. But yeah, I think Haas should be the lowest of those, but then it depends on how much these resources, and also, like, it depends on how much a team writes off. Here's the weird call for you. I think that it's going to be very much Aston and Alpine fighting, like, right up the front, with Williams in and out of that situation at various races. And the reason for that is Aston, I think, are going to be stress testing and getting everything prepared for Newey, and, you know, Cowell's going to be stressing them, and Cardile is coming in, and they're not going to want to wait for 2026. They're going to be focused on 2026, but I think they're going to be stress testing stuff enough that it should allow them to kind of be in and about. Alpine are going to put all their eggs in the 2025 basket because Flavio's trying to sell the team. So that's the cleverest way to do it. And then I think Williams had so much pain last year to prepare themselves. And the way Vowles wants to do things is he wants to make sure the team is running efficiently this year so that they can fight in 2026. It's probably a crazy idea, but I think that's what they'll do, you know?
Yeah, it could be. Ideally, again, the late season form does show that Alpine might be up there.
Mm-hmm.
You still kind of take a step back when it comes to Alpine because, again, it's Alpine.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. But again, if it is fifth fastest, I won't be surprised, to be honest.
Yeah.
It could be. Then you have Aston is something I'm not really sure. It could be the fifth fastest. It could drop down the order, and it could just jump up. According to Alonso, he's not very confident about where it's going to be in 2025 because his entire focus and maybe the entire team's focus seems to be on 2026, which I don't think is the right way to go about it. But again, that's how they're going to approach it.
I feel like that's what they said. That's what I'm saying. I think that's changed now that Andy Cowell's taken over. He seems to be kind of pushing to kind of go, no, we should be not fighting for a title, obviously, but we should be somewhat competitive in 2025 and our upgrades should work and, you know, all these different things. I think that's what's changed. I think Newey's obviously gone, no, that's the wrong approach. Like, we'll design a great car for 2026, but if we can't do anything in 2025, we're not going to be able to do anything in 2026, you know? So,
yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
Because exactly. There has to be the team should be a well-oiled machine while until you get the fastest car, right? So I hope it happens, but again, it's still a bit of a wild card for me. I think Haas would be right there next to them because, again, entirely based on the form that they had last season. It was it was Hülkenberg's brilliance or just the car being that good. He was top 5, I think, in the last qualifying in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And if the car is doing that on the last race of the season, there's something there. Plus, again, this car will be a bit, maybe not the front suspension, but it is still a derivative of Ferrari. And Ferrari, we are expecting it to be good. So that some of it is going to, ultimately trickle down to here.
But even if they have the end of 2023 Ferrari, they've got a really well-balanced car. I think the problem for them is that a lot of Ferrari's turnaround at the end was to do with the fact that they went all in on getting on top of the flexi wings at the front, which I think is just some expertise that Haas just isn't quite there with yet. And I think, like, on top of having to deal with that, it's also changing after 9 races, which is fine for the top teams and maybe for an Aston Martin that now has like all the top equipment. But for Haas, it's like, how do you handle that situation? You know, you basically have to go, well, we need to do the flex the way it's going to be for the whole season at the start, which means you're losing performance at the start and then hoping.
Yeah, but do you think they can make such a jump, such drastic change when the announcement is made in late January? I think they've already committed to the start of the car by already. It's basically whatever changes are going to be made, they're going to be made a bit later. It's going to the next phase.
I wonder how much that's going to change things as well, because I know it's only 5 millimeters, but in Formula
a lot of
1
people are saying a lot is going to change because the pecking order will just change drastically. I'm not of the view that it's going to be drastic. I think there will be minute changes at best, but it's something one has to wait and see. Because look, the flexi wings are a great addition, but they alone do not bring lap time to a car, and we've seen it time and again.
It does help with the balance, which is amazing for the race setup.
Of course.
The thing on that I think a lot of fans were getting excited that, like, oh, they've gotten rid of some of the flexibility that's going to screw McLaren, and I think I'm just of the opposite opinion, which is
it's the opposite.
We've seen from Red Bull, like, if you try and put in a technical directive, the team that's winning is the team that is most able to cope with it because they're already ahead. So you're just scaling them back a little bit and you end up hurting everyone else. So I actually think McLaren probably, and the fact that McLaren were so like, cool, change it. You know, they were
Red Bull was furious, by the way.
Yeah, because they put so much effort into getting ready for this.
It's silly. It's FIA being a completely
just
incompetent
left it
bunch.
For the whole season, there was no point to change it after 9 races.
Or if you have to change it, just change it at the end of the season. I mean, if they made this announcement in Abu Dhabi 2024, teams have enough time, but you've kind of screwed things up.
They should have just, when they had the discussion, when they basically said, like, you know, we're just going to stick with it, it should have just been a commitment to, like, right, look, for better or for worse, we're keeping it for 2025, and that's that. You know, like, it's just like this. If there was another 4 or 5 years, or even 2 years, or even one more season after 2025 of these regulations, fine. But when it's the last season of the regs, it's like, look, let's just live with it for the season. We've already committed to it, you know. So it feels to me like that's something that McLaren's happy about. So
obviously,
you know, and the thing about McLaren that gives me a bit of optimism for them is McLaren seems like they're kind of a fairly straightforward team now with Andrea Stella. So if he's happy about the change, that probably means they're pretty confident about. Like, they're not playing games. They're just like, yeah, this will benefit us.
Yeah. So. Yeah, they've been honest. They've actually been honest about that bit.
Yeah, some other teams play games around it, don't they? They'll act annoyed when actually it suits them. Whereas McLaren's been the opposite. Like, when they think things are going to go well, it goes well, you know.
Stella is still learning on the job as well. So for him, the games come a bit later in his career. So
the games come when you're in these title fights for a long time,
Yeah. And anyways, coming back to I think Williams is, again, it should be better, but how better, I don't know. Again, the crashes need to stop. You cannot have 10 million worth of crashes. It's preposterous.
Yeah, I think that should be better this season, not just because
obviously
of science.
Because Logan is not there.
Yeah, like not just because of science. Like, I also just think a lot of that was down to just having a poorly balanced car as well last year. Because, like, I love that. Like, one thing fans seem to forget is like, the driver can only do so much, and if the driver's pushing and the car is shit, then you're going to have more crashes. Because as soon as you push to the edge, the car just completely is imbalanced and crashes. Like, you can't. A driver can't fight physics, you know. So like, when you see Albon, who in Williams at least has been quite good at not crashing a lot, it's like, oh, this car is clearly difficult to drive, you know.
Precisely.
So.
But yeah, let's see. I'm again, according to Carlos, there's a gap of around half a second between the midfield and the front. But again, how the winter break has actually helped them, and they are also coming off a handicap, right? The kind of crashes they've had, it has eaten into the development budget as well for this season. So how they make up for it, I think one thing is going to happen this season. I think Carlos is going to be the level at which Carlos is perceived until now. I think we're going to peg him back a level or two, because again, car makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to Williams, that's there. Racing Bulls, again,
depends where Red Bull is.
Yeah, it's going to be similar to that. Sauber, I have no clue, because because the car improved at the end of the season. They scored points in Qatar, and Qatar is not really. It's not a special track in terms of it has specific demands. It's a good aerodynamic track. Who knows? I have no idea what goes on.
The thing about this season
Sauber.
that's just the big thing is, like, we're pretty sure that there's going to be a top 4 and then the rest. But honestly, it just
might not be.
Like, I'm always a bit cautious because 2024, when we were going into preseason testing, this is going to be another dominant Red Bull season, and Ferrari and McLaren ended up fighting for the constructors. So we're so close and so near the end of these regulations now that it could go. Like, you could easily have like an Aston Martin, who are very good at copying other teams from the past. You know, you could easily have an Aston Martin come in and all of a sudden be in that top 4. Like, it's very unlikely, but it's so close now that I wouldn't be surprised if one of the back teams was just an outlier and started fighting the top front, or if we show up and George Russell is leading the title by the end of like the mid-season, like, it could just go any way at this point.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's, so I don't know. Everyone's hyping for McLaren, and I'm a bit like, I think they are the favorites, but this could change very drastically.
I think what people need to remember is, even though you can say McLaren was the fastest car, it was not by much.
No,
it's not that they had this whopping lead over others.
Yeah, like even in Abu Dhabi, what was like? Let me just look at
5 or 6 seconds only.
So Lando compared to Oscar was 0.2 of a second, right? But then we go from there. Carlos Sainz was 0.02 of a second behind that. 200ths, sorry, of a second behind that. Hulkenberg was 0.06 of a second off of Carlos Sainz. You've got another 10th roughly down to Max, and then Alpine is randomly 200 or 400ths off Max. So yeah, like, you're talking like literally from 1st to 7th in qualifying was half a second, and if you go from 2nd to 6th, it's just over, just under 0.2.
Jesus.
So, like, we could get in a situation where we show up and Alpine is fighting for for wins. Like that sounds ridiculous, but it was so close at the end of the last season, and no big regulation has happened or a change has happened. This could be a very bizarre season where, like, if Aston show up and Aston have got a car that's only a tenth off of the top teams, Alonso's winning races. Like,
100%.
You know,
100%.
I have no doubt.
If the car is 3/10 off, he's still winning races.
Or
I
he's
won't be
getting
surprised. He
podiums
almost won a race in 2020. What was it? 2023 in Monaco, right? He can do it again. We really have to see where the car is. I hope Aston Martin has a strong season, cause Alonso versus Lewis is a battle I want to see. We didn't really get to see much of it in 2023. There were moments which were brilliant, but you want to see it throughout the season. You want to see Alonso chirp a little. You want to see Lewis do something back. That kind of, gets the blood flowing. So I really hope that happens.
I'm hopeful that next week we're in a situation at the end of testing. My ideal situation at the end of testing would be like, I have no idea what the order is. Like, that would be great, because that would mean it's very close. Because as much as lap times don't make a difference and testing is only testing, we generally get, like, not a full order, but we generally know, idea. Like, we kind of know, like, these are the top teams, top 2 or 3 teams, this is the rest, and then this is the back marker. You know, like, kind of, we know roughly. And if we go into a situation where, even if there's 1 or 2 back markers, but everyone else is like, this is too close to call, we could have a wild season on our hands, because I think it's fair to say, like, we've got some of the best drivers ever on the grid right now, like, in terms of how close they are.
100%. 100%. And a lot of people shit on this grid. I think this is probably one of the best grids I've seen. Where you have 7 different elite drivers, right? And again, you have Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Bearman, who people are high on, but they're yet to be proven talents. They could be by the end of the season, but
got Colapinto, who'll be in a
race Colapinto as well. There are 10 drivers that could actually be just brilliant. It makes it fun. Again, it makes it a lot of fun. By the way, one team that you're really keeping an eye on out of all of them, you really want them to do well.
If I had to pick a team that I really want to do well, and a team I'm kind of silently become like a fanboy of, that I kind of want to be back, it's Williams. I would love if Williams.
You're just James Ball's fan, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I think this is the reason why Jack Whitehall has got new respect for me. He's a vowel head as well.
Everyone should be a vowel head.
Yeah.
There's no.
If I had to say, like, that's the one person that I'm very much, or one team that I'm like, I would.
You can say the person. We all know that.
No,
it's
do you know
Jimmy
what it is,
consonants all the time.
The history of Williams is just so, like, as much as Frank Williams made some horrible decisions and drove the team apart, he also built that team, like, and brought it to places where it started from, it never should have gotten to. You know, like, and Williams' 100%. History is incredible. And it's kind of, you can almost say, like, I can kind of understand why he was that bullish, because he had come from, you know, where he did to where he got to, you know, and, like, that's incredible. So I would love to see Williams back there, because, like, the reason I was rooting for McLaren a lot last year is that McLaren similarly has that history of, like, this is a team that did things it shouldn't have at points in its history, and it's nice to see them back up. And just we've had Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull for just so long, like, you know. So yeah, Williams, I would love to see up there. If Colapinto does get on the grid, I'm gonna be a Colapinto fan.
He will be on the grid. He will be on the grid.
I'm going to be a Colapinto fan, but I'm also going to be quite annoyed about that, because of the team he's driving for.
Same here.
Like, it's a mixed bag, that.
I mean, it would be interesting, right? If you have Williams making this massive jump and suddenly it becomes a podium contending team. Where does Colapinto go? Because Colapinto, according to James, he's still a Williams driver, and he wants to be. Well, he wants to see him back in the team in the future.
This is the thing. Like, if Williams are getting, this is going to be a hard one, though, isn't it? Because if Williams are getting, like, podiums by the end of the year, and it genuinely looks like they're going to be a force in 2026, and James Vels is the god that we all think he is, right? If that happens, and you get a similar situation, and you, like, at the same time simultaneously get a situation where Carlos Sainz is just destroying Alex Albon. And I mean, just like properly destroying him. As much as you have to kind of think, oh, well, Albon's helped like build this team back up.
Yeah.
The pragmatic decision is to go, well, let's put Colapinto alongside Sainz for 2026.
Yeah.
And at which point I become a full-on Williams fanboy for 2026.
Oh, 100%. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question. 100%. Even I'll do that.
Yeah.
But let's see what... Personally, the team that I want to see... I've actually alluded to it earlier. Aston Martin right up there with all the top 4 teams. I want to see Alonso in the mix. Just final confirmation because, again, last season brought a few doubts. They're not major doubts, but I want to see Alonso in the mix and I want to see how he fares against all these guys because, look, Lewis has his fan base. He has his aura and charm. Fernando Alonso, when he has the right car under him, he's cinema.
Well, see, I was going to say Alonso and Aston, but the problem is that in 2022, for half of a season, I went
23.
on this. No, in 2022, for half of a season, I went on this major binge of saying next year, Aston's going to be the one to watch. And I got laughed at repeatedly in the comments by everyone who was listening to Wheel Sports at the time until 2023. And I was like, holy shit, it's happened.
It actually happened.
Yeah. And then, because it was like everything I was hearing, I was like, these guys are pulling something together. And the problem with that was it turned out that it was actually less of Aston doing brilliantly and more of everyone else shitting the bed other than Red Bull. So I would have said it's Alonso and Aston for my that I want to get hyped about. But like Ferrari, I've been hurt before, so I'm going to wait until it happens before I get too excited.
Yeah. Because look, for me, the worst case scenario is Alonso getting a car that's so dominant that no one competes with him. Because then he becomes an insufferable prick, and I don't want that. I've seen.
I could live with it for a year.
I mean, we can live with it. That's fine.
To get his 3rd title, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
After that, relax, man.
Exactly. Enough. Time to leave Grandpa. But I want to see a season of him competing against Lewis. Throwing these little chirps again and again. All the soft-skinned people just getting so annoyed. I mean, that's the best. That's the best Fernando Alonso for me because when he has a decent enough car where he can show people what he is, because what he does in races, it does not get the credit that it truly deserves. Yeah. Even at the start of 2024, remember, he held, I think it was he held back Russell in Jeddah. He almost did the same in Australia before the crash, the whole thing that happened. You have to... That kind of brilliance not many drivers are able to do. And I just want to see it again.
Yeah.
It won't happen, but again, I just want to see it finally play out.
So to end on this, I guess everyone who's watching this should just enjoy the next couple of weeks because this could be one of the best seasons in the world. Or it could be a season where we show up and Red Bull, Ferrari or McLaren ends up winning the first 3 races by 40 seconds or something. And all of it will come crashing down and we'll all be looking forward to 2026. So, let's enjoy this unknown for the next couple of weeks. For the next month, roughly. 3 weeks.
Give and take.
That. Because it could go one way or the other. And I'm just going to enjoy the unexpected for now.
It's going to be fun either ways, honestly. Well,
right.
Formula 1 is back, by the way. We'll be doing our next pod would be we'll try to push one out, a bit of you can say, the recap of the first day of testing and stuff, right?
Yeah.
We'll try to cover that.
We'll definitely do a post-testing, long podcast as well, or whatever.
Yeah, that too. That'll be
either we do, we try and catch up for, an hour each day of testing, or we just do, one big fucking, go through everything.
Yeah. Try to do it. We'll plan it out.
Yeah.
Something on those lines.
Let's not say anything, because McLaren, we don't want to have too much expectation on us.
Precisely.
Subscribe, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.